Thank you for your time today. And your session is called The Competitive Advantage in Today's Marketplace. I know you're going to take us through how XPS Solutions can be a resource when it comes to that. Bob, if you don't mind, give us a quick 30-second to a minute rundown of who you are, what you do, and what XPS Solutions does.
Okay, great. So I've got about personally 36 years experience being in businesses that have driven some aspect of customer service, and where it's migrated to today is really client experience. So using that background, working with XPS Solutions, who's been around since 2000 in the call center business, answering phones for self-storage and helping tenants in self-storage facilitate that client experience to the next level. And I think that one of the advantages we have, we're located in Dallas. We're about 60,000 square feet. We have 170 people on payroll, and our primary focus is just self-storage. So if you look at that, what I want to do with today is more share with you what we see big picture, because we work with thousands of sites doing millions of transactions and millions of interactions. And I think that knowledge base we should share with everyone, no matter how big, how small, how new, or how mature your business is. I think it gives you a distinct advantage to see what's happening big picture. Is that good, Jessica?
Yeah. Did you have, I'm sorry, were there more slides here for you to go through or no?
Oh, yeah. So that's just kind of the overview. So thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So sorry.
So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, that's great for you. I was like, wait a minute.
She's getting a little nervous.
I was. No.
Yeah. So as you get to know me, having enough slides, it will never be a problem.
Well, that's good. That's good. Sorry. And I'm toggling between a lot of things over here on the back end. So my
That's
apologies.
okay.
But no, that was great. Go ahead.
Keeping me to 20 minutes is going to be the challenge. So let's just dive in.
Yeah, dive in, please. By all means, let's kick this off, get started.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about this, but let me just say that there's probably 3 areas that we work with that we see that some storage sites have better advantages over others. So we're going to talk about those 3 areas. One is prospects. So, if you don't know the data, it's really important in any business. Sometimes when we look at this phase of the business, people are a little unsure what those data points are. So I'm just going to start by saying the average site gets about 20% of their interactions are going to be with prospects, which means about 80% of those interactions are going to be with tenants. So just knowing that going in, I think is allows you to take a look at your business a little differently. So if I take a look at the 80%, those are broken into 2 areas. So half of those, roughly 40 to 60% of those tenant interactions are going to be about payments. And we're going to talk about the ability today to use automation to drive a competitive advantage. This is one big area of the business that automation is really important. The second area is going to be support calls. So about half of those tenant calls, again, 20 to 40% roughly, are going to be communications to your tenants. They're going to ask questions like, I need to know my gate code. I forgot my unit number. So these are going to be fairly interactive situations where I also think that there are some keys in the marketplace today to empower the tenant to find out that information without bringing your staff into that conversation multiple times during the day. So if you're okay with that, I'll just keep going.
Yeah,
so let's talk. I call it the big 3. It's the 20-80-40 rule. So remember, 20% of the interactions are going to be based off of prospects looking to rent up. 80% of those are going to be tenant calls, and out of that 40% in each direction are probably going to be support calls around payments and or tenant questions. So I'm going to pack each of those. So let's take a look at the 20%, because that's the area that causes us to increase our revenue. And I know today in storage, if you look at storage, most of our customers are running at 90, 95% rental, fill rate today. So it may be that you're not thinking this is important, but it is, because what's happening is The prospects out there are not making 2 or 3 calls or trying to find the solution in 1 or 2 areas, but it's forcing them because of availability to make more calls and more inquiries. So I want to talk a little bit about that because I believe that's called the moment of truth. As a matter of fact, Google does a white paper on this called the 0 moment of truth. And that's your very first interaction. So your first interaction gives you the competitive advantage. It may be the only interaction you get. So you need to make sure that you stop the shopping with that interaction. So let's talk about how that happens. So if you look at staffing, one of the things that are really important if I'm calling about a facility to store is I really want to maybe answer some questions with a live call. So I know that there's lots of ways to go onto the website to look at what you have available and to interact, but it normally causes you to ask questions that can't be answered on the website alone. So you've got to really be prepared to handle that call. First impressions are the most important. And today it's difficult because we're in an environment that our first impressions are normally face to face. In this environment, you really have to be good with people you can't see. So there's a little training there that needs to be done at the facility. If you want to take these calls yourself, you need to be prepared for that. I think the second part is in any industry today, training is probably one of the areas that we fall a little short on because of the amount of time it takes, because of the amount of repetition needed to be really good at it. But the real keys here are to be helpful, friendly, and kind. So that's exactly what I'm looking for when I look for storage is were you helpful, were you friendly, and were you kind? And then that means that there are certain words that you need to use that stand out. And I'll give you a couple of those instead of I can help you. Maybe it's I can certainly help you with that. So you want to use some words that are empowering words, what we call power words and phrases. The other thing that really makes a big determination if I picked you or not are reviews that make you stand out. So, I have friends that own storage facilities, and sometimes I look at their websites and I notice that the last review they did was maybe 6, 8 months ago, and it was a poor review. And, the question is, what do you do with those? So there's lots of things you can do, but let me tell you the main thing with reviews is that you respond back to every review, good or bad. So there's a comment section that helps me make a decision if the business is interactive with your customers or not. But the second thing you need to do is you need to have lots of daily fresh reviews. So one of the ways I'd recommend you do that, and what we do on our end, is on every phone call, if it's a tenant call, at the end of the call, if it was a really good call, if it was a payment call or just a tenant asking a question, we're going to ask them to do a review. We're going to send them a link so they can actually fill out that review. The average site gets 3 to 5 calls a day. They miss 2 to 3 of those calls, which is why it's important to have somebody available for that live interaction. But more importantly, that means you could get 2 or 3 reviews every day, which would really drive your SEO, would drive your ratings up, but it will also show that this week alone you had 5 to 7 new fresh reviews. Very important to have the competitive advantage there. I'm going to look at your competitor. If they don't have reviews that were within the last month or 2 months, and you have 5 or 6 just this week, it clearly tells a story. I think the other area too that sometimes we're not paying attention to is the hours that we're open. I call that establishing a business relationship. So, sometimes we have overflow where we're taking 2 calls at the same time. Might miss one, it goes to voicemail. And then other times it's just after hours. I'll give you a real example of after hours. I store stuff at a facility myself, and I had movers come into my house and they needed to pick up another truck for the move because it was more than they anticipated. And the people that we were buying the house from had an interruption of their mover coming at the same day. So they needed to push it back a couple days. So I had to store my stuff temporarily. And I got to tell you, they called the facility at 7:50 in the morning. The facility opened at 8. They didn't answer. So the moving company called the next facility, got them on the phone, and they got the business. So it's really important that we're open 40 to 48 hours, most sites. that are manned. The real important thing is we push those hours to 104. So we're there at 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. If you're only there from 8 to 5 and someone has a more competitive advantage where they're able to answer on a live call more hours, that puts you at a disadvantage. So there's another area that's not that expensive to be able to cover your hours longer, or you need to figure a way to do that yourself. And then the last piece are the right tools. So, when you have that sales call to stop the shop and you want to set a reservation, in some cases, you might want to see those folks face to face so you can make a decision. One of the areas you could double the show rate on the reservations and absolutely stop them from calling the next facility is offering them some kind of incentive to come tour the facility. Today, we give them an Amazon gift card, a Walmart gift card, a Home Depot gift card that has to be redeemed electronically at the facility. So that doubles the show rate on the reservations. And then the last piece is, I know this is subject to some criticism in today's market, but you need to be able to take that caller like myself that wanted a storage facility. I didn't necessarily want to go down. I've already been past the facility many times as I'm driving by. There are 9 facilities in my market. When I called in, I didn't want to set up a tour. I didn't want to set up a reservation. I wanted to see if the terms were agreeable. Could I just do the paperwork from my home office? Can you send me a link and let me rent up? Can the person on the other end of the phone walk me through, take the deposit, set me up properly? And those are some of the things today that will give you the distinct advantage, because if I rent you up while somebody else is still trying to shop the next facility, I've already taken you out of the market. So very important. Let me just keep going, because the next piece is about the tenant calls. So I'm going to reiterate the fact that staffing is so important to cover extra hours, because it may make the difference of you getting that storage rental or someone else's. Beside the fact, if I'm a tenant and you can answer the phone when I have a question, that allows me not to just stay longer. But I think the real impact is when someone asks me where I store, I can tell them I store with you, and you guys are always there for me if I have a question, even if it's at 8 o'clock at night. So I think that's really important to have the distinct advantage. I'm going to keep going. There's another really, I think, underutilized area in our business. When someone sends you a web form, the average industry today takes about 15 minutes to answer a web lead. So the first question I have, do you know how long it takes your team to answer your web leads? There are tools and ways to be able to take that web lead and turn it into a phone call in 20 seconds, and then 60 seconds, you can reach back out to that customer, catch them on the phone while they're still on your website. So the question is, if I submit 4 or 5 leads to people in my marketplace because it's the time that I have available to do it, and I don't want to pick up the phone, I can do that via web. And you've already had the opportunity to engage with me, you'll talk to 5 times more customers than if you don't have that in place. So the average web lead, if it takes 10 to 15 minutes, you get about a 12% connect rate with that customer. If you have a solution and a process and the technology to get to that customer within a minute, you'll talk to 48% of those customers. So I think that's another area that's not underutilized today that we need to pay attention to have the advantage. I'm going to move right along. That's what I talked about when we talked about reservation show rate doubling. You should be able to give your customers an incentive to come and take a tour. Now, let's say I'm rented up 95%. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to give them an incentive? And the answer is simple. If I called 7 other facilities in your marketplace and you guys at least offered me something to come down, the first thing, even if you didn't have the space, the first thing you have done is you've separated yourself from the rest of the group. If you have not mystery shopped those 7 and 9 sites in your immediate market, you need to, because you'll hear things like, yeah, you need to go onto the website and log in, and then you can take a look at what we have available, which doesn't answer my question. It could be, I went to voicemail because nobody's there to man the facility. So we hear all kind of things when we do some basic mystery shopping, and there are services out there you can get that does that. But at the end of the day, you really need to know, do you have the advantage or not in the marketplace? So I think that things like this is kind of like the white glove treatment. You're giving them something of value in addition to answering their questions. And then I'll kind of get a little closer here to the tenant calls. The tenant calls we receive, 40% of them want to make a payment. And as you handle these in the facility yourself, you know that they basically make 3 calls to make 1 payment. The first call is, what is my balance? The second call is, when is it due? And the third call is to make the payment. So we see that multiple times. So you're not just taking 1 tenant call for a payment. Sometimes you're taking up to 3. You can do a couple things with that. But here's what happens if you have a billing week that's the first week of the month when all of your bills go out. You're going to increase, the average site will get 300% more calls that week than they will any other week. So it makes it very difficult to handle that volume. So what are some of the things you could do that would be different? We're going to talk a little bit about having an interactive voice response program, an IVR, to take most of those payments. I'll show you some solutions in a minute that about 97% or 87% of your payment calls should be automated. We call it unmanned payments. You shouldn't have to touch those. 60% of those calls are going to be about gate access, questions that they have. Maybe they were locked in the facility after hours. And helpful, friendly, kind, you need to make sure on those, if you can solve that problem, again, that you ask for reviews to make you stand out. So when you look at the process, again, I'm looking at tenants saying that the establish a business relationship. Are you open 40 hours or can they connect to you live 104 hours? That's a big difference. The other question is, do you have the interactive tools that you need today? So there are a couple of those. One would be IVR, and the second one would be a mobile app. I do almost everything, and I'm sure you guys are probably very similar to the way I do it. Almost all my business is done on my mobile phone. So I think when you talk about kiosks and are they, things that are in today's market that are feasible, I'd say they are. But, at the end of the day, if I don't have a gate access code, if I could look at my phone when I'm driving up to your gate and it gives it to me without calling anybody, without getting out, it's totally touchless. I think it makes a world of sense. So we're going to talk about areas you should be automating. So we've got about 2 minutes, I believe, left in this.
I'm popping in to give you that warning, Bob.
Okay. So you want to look, 97% of your payments do not need to be taken by your team. We automate all those. So at the end of the day, our team is not locked into all those calls, especially the billing week when you guys get hit the hardest. And then I think the next piece is you need to have a mobile app. And a mobile app to me is more than just a gate opener. It needs to store my photos of what I've got in there. It needs to give me my unit number, my gate code number, it needs to give me my balance. It needs to give me my payment date. It needs to give me the ability to click a box and actually make a payment right on the spot. So I think that these are the areas that keep the customer experience higher. And when I'm talking about storage to my friends, these are the things that separate one storage facility from another. And with that, I'll just wrap it up. If you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call. But I think that reviews on every call that are positive or important. Drive more reviews. And then the last piece is if you need to reach out for any questions, we'd be glad to point you in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Bob, for attending today and speaking with us. And as Bob said, unfortunately, due to time restraints, we can't take any live questions. But if you do have questions for Bob and his team over at XPS, you can place those in the chat. You can place those in the Q&A. Also, you can visit XPS's company page in the participating companies area. And then you can also, lots of options here, do a one-on-one meeting with Bob and his team. You can request to network with them and ask your questions directly to them. So, Bob, so sorry we ran out of time. Great information. Thank you for joining us today. And anyone that has questions for your team, we'll make sure to get those over to you guys.
Okay, Jessica, thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.